Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Reed Hall, to the Rendez-vous de l'Institut, a series of events where we have the great privilege of hearing our fellows talk about their projects. I'm Marie Dorigny. I'm the Paris director of the Institute for Ideas and Imagination. This evening, Kamal Aljafari will talk about his work, his film practice, and his use of found footage. A Palestinian filmmaker, Kamal studied at the Academy of Media and Arts in Cologne and has taught at the New School in New York. He was a fellow at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute and at the Camargo Foundation in the south of France. His films are frequently shown in festivals around the world, and his most recent one, a Fidai Film, opened the Vision du Réel festival in Nyon last year. Some of you may have seen his work in Paris at the Forum des Images, where Kamal was part of a roundtable on film archives yesterday evening. Speaking to us the other day about coming across presumably unseen footage, only to realize that he was the one who had shot it and forgotten all about it, Kamal called that film the first film I never made. His work is a reflection on history, ethics, and aesthetics, what we see, what we forget, what disappears, and what is made invisible. The result is very political, playful, uncomfortable, hard to pin down, disorienting, and very poetic, and at times filmed with humor. Of course, the transfiguration happens in the editing room, and this great forager of found and forgotten footage is here to tell us more about his work. Thank you, Kamal.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy finally to talk about what I have been doing since a couple of months. And I would like to start with an image which led me to become who I am today, and kept me busy in the last 12 years, basically working with found footage. And this is an image of my uncle that I found by chance passing by in a fiction film. Basically appeared in the film without being an extra. He wasn't an actor, he was just passing by in the background. And when I saw this image, I knew exactly what time it was and where he was going. Maybe we can play the video. There were only 4 seconds of him in the background of this film, shot in Jaffa in the year 2008. And I knew exactly where he was going because it was a Sunday morning, and this is usually the day he goes back to the mental hospital. I knew him as a ghost. He would appear and disappear for longer periods of time. And he appears in this film exactly the way I knew him, a ghost, and in someone else's film, not his own film. There was something so cinematic about this discovery that brings us back to the idea of photography, which the French philosopher André Bazin refers to as the mummy complex that we all have, human being. We want to freeze time. We want to live forever. And this led me as well to a kind of conclusion that a picture lasts longer than a human being. So this discovery, in fact, led me to the making of my first found footage film, which was based on dozens of Israeli and American fiction films shot in Jaffa, the city where I grew up, which was a set for many fiction films as early as the 60s and finished nearly in the 80s with more kind of war films. And in this work, I collected many of the moments that appeared in the background of these fiction films that were actually not part of the main narrative of the films. These people that we see, they're of course totally out of focus. They were not the subject matter of the film. And for this project, I collected nearly 60 films, fiction films. And this was during a residency I had at Harvard. I had an access to the local cinema there, and I could project these films in the cinema. And I spent nights and nights. It was too cold anyway to do anything in Boston. And I spent really nights and nights because they gave me the keys of the cinema at nights, no, because they were not using it. And I spent many nights projecting these films and, so to say, practicing a kind of work of photography, being a tourist in the city. And what I was interested in at the beginning was, in fact, the backgrounds of these films, because many of the locations that we saw, we see in these films, especially the ones in the 60s and 70s, they were of neighborhoods that no longer exist in reality physically. They only existed in fiction films. So this was the beginning of my process. And then I started noticing all these people that actually were not part of the original narrative of the films, because most of these films, they were shot on location. And it's quite ironical because the narratives of these Israeli and American fiction films completely excluded the Palestinian existence. Palestinians did not exist in these films. So in a way, these films, they were a kind of second uprooting of the people. So it was once in reality and second time in fiction cinema. But ironically speaking, the same films that did that ended up being the source of documentary for me. So there were many, many people that passed by, and somehow they smuggled themselves into the image, so to say. So basically, it comes at towards the end. This scene comes at the end of the film, where many of the people that I found in the background, they march together, and basically declaring that there are no ghosts anymore, that they are still alive. And while working on this film, I really, at some point, there were so many of these people that were in the background, somehow existing all this time, but nobody pay attention to. I started to believe that all these years they were waiting for me to discover them and to make a film with them. I mean, it's a kind of things that you invent yourself somehow to, to give you the strength of working with this kind of material. There was another event that took place that I told the story so many times, I feel like I'm repeating myself. One day I was invited to show a film in London, and I entered my hotel room, and I see the announcement on the TV, "Welcome, Mr. Aljafari." And I don't know if hotels do that anymore. I think it was in the past they have it on the TV. And then I changed the channel, and I went on to take a shower. And I came out of the shower, and I see a film playing there that I haven't seen before, but I could recognize the location and the images. And this was Delta Force starring Chuck Norris. Because when I was 14 years old, I was on my way back from the school to my grandparents' house in Jaffa, and suddenly I see a group of people gathered waiting for kind of shooting to start, and they were all excited and repeating the name of Chuck Norris. I didn't know who this person was. But what was really quite crazy about the scene that we will play for you now, that the van that Chuck Norris is using carried the name of my school, San Joseph, where I went to school in Jaffa. So we can play this.
Where's that son of a bitch now?
So in this film, actually, Jaffa is not Jaffa, it's Beirut during the Civil War. And it's something that was quite, Jaffa as a place was then in the 80s used as a set for war films. So as a child, I knew about Chuck Norris arriving there, Van Damme, another person that came there, and even Sylvester Stallone, who came to shoot a film about Afghanistan. And it's like this type of cinema that is really absurd, because they wouldn't even use the local Palestinians as actors in these films. They would take Mizrahi Jews to act the terrorists, and like in this film. And some of these actors, they didn't speak Arabic well, so they speak really bizarre kind of Arabic. And it makes it really, when you come from the place and you watch this, it makes it really totally hilarious. So something that was quite violent that happened during the shooting of this film, that the municipality of Tel Aviv actually gave the film producers, this film was shot in 1983, they gave them an empty building of a school in Jaffa by the sea, and they could use it as they wish. And we see, for the final scene of this film, an explosion of the building where the hostages, because the film is like a typical Hollywood film taking place in the Middle East. It's about American hostages being kept in a school somewhere in Beirut. And then the Delta Force with Chuck Norris, they come to freedom. And they managed to free everybody, and they explode the building. And this was a real-time explosion that took place. Basically, this film participating in the destruction of the city. And this is the scene. So this is where cinema really plays an active role in destroying places, in occupying places, and also changing reality. So in a way, these experiences really changed my path completely in filmmaking. You know, when I went to study film in Cologne, my dream was to shoot films, and I really ended up not shooting films because there was an urgency in the images that I was finding that I have to somehow engage with it. And somehow these discoveries, they were so mysteriously so autobiographical. So I would discover this film that, you know, I witnessed shooting when I was a child, years after, in a hotel room in London. So all of this material was really, for me, very emotional and personal. And in a way, it made me believe that being involved in a subject make things happen accordingly. Things find you. Images find you. So in a way, these were films that were making themselves. I would always say that this is a film that is making itself. So I'm not under control, like I'm under control, not of control of the material. We want to show it still, no? So yeah, I thought that the project that I worked on, which dealt with the vanishing city of Jaffa, and after making recollection, that this was really a one-time discovery. And afterwards, I was working on a project related, a fiction film related to the life of my uncle, who passed away in a mental hospital and who appeared in this fiction film. And it was a film that is trying to narrate the life of a ghost. So I was visiting my family one day, and my sister is asking me about the film, and you know, usually you try to explain. It takes time to make films because you write a project, and then you have to finance it, and then you have to convince financiers to trust you, to give you money, etc., etc. And it takes years, and in between, many things happen. And then she tells me, perhaps you should look at the VHS tapes. And I said, which VHS tapes? And she tells me the story that someone used to break my father's car. And my father finally decided to install a surveillance camera to find out who's breaking his car. And he filmed for 1 month. Finally, he found out the man who was breaking the car window. And he was just a crazy man that created an obsession with the car of my father. So I love the idea of making a film with this material. So I started collecting all these VHS tapes that were everywhere in the house. And I took them with me to Berlin, and my sister couldn't believe that because she was joking with me. And I had to buy luggage, you know, are you serious to take these VHS tapes that were like kept next to the washing machine and totally destroyed? And so I took them to Berlin, and I started watching, and I was really so fascinated by the images I saw. So they were on VHS, and my father would sometimes record over the tapes. Because he wouldn't, I mean, the main aim of the recording was to find this person, and he would watch and he wouldn't find him. So he would record over the tapes. And these recordings, over recordings of the tape, created really amazing work of art. So I started watching, and I had to slow down the images because it was all in fast forward. I mean, it was very old-fashioned kind of camera. I mean, my father really manually connected the camera with the VHS tapes. It was really a lot of work. I was quite busy with it. It was at the moment that he stopped working, so I think he quite enjoyed this work. So I started watching, and I really got so fascinated by these recordings because, you know, filmmakers have no patience. And the surveillance camera has all the patience in the world. So it records and it records with no end. And I started taking notes. I mean, finally, there were something like 60 hours of material that I was watching. And my objective was to find this person that was breaking the car window. But I couldn't find him. And then I thought, okay, there's no film here because, you know, what is the reason then behind making this film? So I started making notes about everything that I see. And then I called my sister and I told her I cannot find the... Then she looked in the house and she found 3 tapes that my father kept in case this person will come again. So she even sent me these tapes. So what I really discovered, because I became a kind of investigator of daily life. I mean, in these images you see my mother, the first person to leave the house, and then my father going to check on the car in the morning, and all the neighbors that actually I knew from my childhood, and I see them again exactly as they are. For example, if you go back to the Imses sisters, so these, like our neighbors, they're really incredible. These 2 sisters, I really never saw them apart. Every time they appear in the street, they are together. And exactly the same, they appear on this material in the same situation. Another person that I saw on this material was a man, also a neighbor of ours, from the family Abu Ghazali. I'm naming all the names because for me they're really quite incredible in their kind of habits. I never saw him walking. He's always on his bike. And he appeared again on the material 1 month long. He almost appears like a couple of times a day on his bike. So as an investigator, you know, all these characters, they become like suspects. So that's the kind of premise of the film. You know, I'm investigating, I'm looking at the people passing by, and this man, for example, every time he passes, he would touch the car. And then finally, I conclude, it's not him, it cannot be him, he's just tired. We can maybe show a clip. Here they are again. So the kind of creation of my father.
Guitar. Mas nam penguin. Quiet. Cactus. Elephant. Fish.
Yeah, the images themselves had no sound, so everything is really worked on afterwards. And for the film, I used my niece as a narrator. And at the time, she needed my help in English, so I recorded everything with her, and I ended up using that in the film. And yeah, I was watching everything, and I would call my sister, and I would tell her, who's this man that was appearing there? And she said, yeah, he was in love with me, you know. Funny, she didn't even marry him, but he was bringing her flowers all the time. So I concluded that after watching so much and collecting notes, there were like really almost 300 pages of notes about everything that is happening in the neighborhood. Even when a cat is passing at night, I would write a red cat, the black cat is passing by, because I would recognize her. And finally, the film works really almost like a proto-cinema. I'm using intertitles in between. And sometimes I would just tell about the neighbors, and sometimes I would conclude, for example, that on my father's camera, everyone has a chance to exist, because everybody was recorded on these tapes. So it's a completely different way of filmmaking than it usually is, because people do casting, and they choose the character. And this camera, the surveillance camera, is so democratic in a way that it gives space to everyone. But everyone is a suspect in a way. Then the next project. So yeah, I still wanted to make this fiction film. I mean, it is really following me for so many years. And this was the year 2020, and this was COVID. So I couldn't shoot this film, I had to postpone it. And for some reason, a friend of mine sent me an article that was from the archives of the New York Times. And this was about an explosion that took place in Beirut in 1983. And the target of this explosion, car explosion, was the building of the Palestine Research Center. And many people died in this explosion, also the workers of this center. And then I started getting really interested in what happened exactly there, and what was the story of this center. Maybe we can show them.
شاغس أول وقب على الفاغس طائية شباكين بعلية من غنيا شاغف حول وقب على الفاغس
actually my last film, which was released last year in July 2024. And the film is based almost entirely on materials that were looted from the Palestine Research Archive in Beirut in 1982. And they were kept for many years in the archives of the army. And when I found these tapes, they had already the writing, a kind of catalog that was made out of them over each of the shots. So there will be writing what you're about to watch. And something that was quite disturbing for me because, for example, the writing would go, you see fighters, and then you see a man a child walking in the mud, or a woman cooking in a tent. Everybody was on the same level of suspect and danger. And the immediate reaction that I had, that I actually wanted to sabotage that. And by this work of sabotage, in a way, all this work that you see here with the red, this was my intervention in the image. In a way, it was somehow reflecting on the state of mind of the country and the people. For example, that image at the corner there with the lines, it was really the lines that I saw over the film, the kind of materiality that was almost screaming and carrying all these wounds of the country. So, yeah, the film is trying really to narrate, in fact, 100 years of history in Palestine as early as the British Mandate, and how it was really strange because yesterday I was reading a book and I came across some words from Frantz Fanon that I would love to read it for you, and which are really quite telling about our time still and about today. Colonialism is not satisfied merely with holding a people in its grip and emptying the native's head of all forms of content. By a kind of prevented logic, it turns to the past of the oppressed people and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. So in this project, I became more and more interested in why, in fact, images are hidden, why images are kept in archives without an access for the public, for the white public. What I'm working on here is another project that again came by chance, and I would like to show you. This is so before coming to Paris, I started being worried about old tapes of mine for my first film, and I wanted to digitize these old tapes, and then I came across one mini DV. Do you remember the mini DV format? Some of you. It's another generation. And with the writing in Arabic, Ma Hassan fi Gaza, which means with Hassan in Gaza. So I was looking at this, I didn't know what it is. I couldn't remember going to Gaza. I thought maybe someone gave it to me. And the following day, I went to the company where they have the player to digitize the mini DVs. And I asked him to put the first thing I asked him, please put this tape. And then it got stuck in the player. And it made this horrible noise, you know, like it doesn't want to move. And then he told me, you have to come tomorrow. I have to open the player. I couldn't sleep that night. So the following day I came and he was ready to show me what is on this tape. And I see traveling shots from a car in Gaza, and I still didn't know what it was. Until a moment that I saw myself in the mirror of the car with the camera. Still, I did not remember that I went there and I filmed there. So I was watching and watching, and until a moment that it was a scene in the house of Hassan that was a kind of a fixer that took me around in Gaza. It was only 24 hours trip that I did. And this was in 2001. I was 29 years old. And it was probably the first time I filmed myself. And this was a scene that I was staying at his home, and there suddenly at night there was shelling coming from the nearby settlement. And I tell him, let's go inside. I was a bit worried. And then he tells me, let's sit down, sit on the floor and watch a basketball game. I remembered this scene because somehow this is the only thing that stayed with me, this kind of memory of this man telling me, don't worry, let's watch a game. So I would like to show you the trailer of the film that will be
Chère patrie, mes chaînes engendrent en mon être la roideur de l'aigle et la tendresse de l'optimiste. Je ne savais pas qu'à travers la peau, notre peau, des orages s'estompaient et des ruisseaux s'unissaient. Ils m'enfermèrent dans un ténébreux cachot, mon cœur s'embrasait de flambeaux rayonnants. Ils marquèrent mon numéro sur les murs, et les murs se transformaient en pâturage verdoyant. Ils dessinèrent la face de mon exécuteur. Sa face se dispersait bientôt. J'ai coupé votre carte avec mes dents contre les murs, et je composais la chanson de la nuit fugitive. J'ai hurlé, défaite à l'obscurité, et plongeais mes mains dans des rayons de lumière. Ils ne conquirent rien, rien. Ils n'éveillaient que des tremblements de terre. Ils n'ont vu que le rayonnement des fronts et entendu que le déroulement des chaînes. Si je me consume sur la croix de ma cause, je deviens un saint en uniforme de combattant.
Yeah, something that I usually do when I work on a new film, I start making a trailer because this is just a draft, because the trailer really somehow helps me to understand the material and to kind of compose a film in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And I found an old LP from the 70s. This was a poem by the Palestinian poet Darwish, Mahmoud Darwish, which was recorded here in France in the 70s, read by a French woman. Yeah, in a way, I'm really, for almost really a decade, I'm trying to make this film, this fiction film, and I ended up really working again and again on this found footage, and this time of my own history. So really a picture lasts longer than a human being. Maybe we go to the stills, please. So this is me, actually. I was 29. So we printed this kind of postcards from the film, and It's something that I do all the time, you know, trying to kind of build up the film, you know, and to understand how I'm going to treat this material. I mean, for the first time, in fact, I'm making a film where I'm not editing, because I'm using this material the way it is, the way I shot it. So I'm using the same kind of order of the shots. What I will do just from time to time to trim, making the shots a bit shorter. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we printed a lot of them, so it goes for a long time. But actually, we have also 2 postcards that we have that you can take with you.
Meredith has the microphone if you have questions.
I have the mic. Any questions?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I was wondering if you could speak a bit to the title of the project or the title of this evening, and I saw that it appeared in one of the frames. So yeah, if you could elaborate on where the phrase comes from or how you composed it.
Yeah. Actually, it's not my own quote. It's a quote from Harun Farouki. I don't know if any of you knows him. He was a German media artist and filmmaker and a theorist. And I came across this quote, which was so much about what I have been doing. And then the lady here found out in the internet something else. What was that? No, you told me that it's coming from...
No, I just quoted Genesis with this idea
Okay.
of making images. Yeah.
So, because in a way, I see my work as a collector, in fact, and I think whatever you do as an artist, you are a collector, in fact. You are a collector of memories, of impressions, and all I do in my work is really to put an order to things, you know. And the editing, you create a certain order for the images, so they tell what you want to say. So finally, I came to this conclusion that actually I don't make the images. The images are there. I just have to find them.
Hello.
Sorry?
Thank you. Can you repeat the name of where you got the person, the German
Harun
theorist?
Farouki, his name.
Harouki.
Yeah, he was an immigrant, but he lived most of his life in Germany. He wrote in German and he made films in Germany. Okay. He's considered to be one of the most important film theorists and filmmakers for the SNF film.
Okay. How do you spell Harouki? I'm just curious.
H-A-R-U-N, Harun Farouki.
Okay.
F-R-A-C-I. I don't know, maybe. Google him, you'll find him.
The Museum of Days. Okay, thank you.
But yeah, his work is amazing.
Thank you. This was incredible and very inspiring. I was wondering about something. So you obsess basically about the past of the city, the past of people. And first, what do you want to say about the present? And then do you ever think about the future of these people who appear on these films, like the kid with the falcon? Like, do you ever wonder what happened to him 24 years later? And then what are you trying to say also through your films about the present situation that we're currently living in, like the under the new colonial situation we're living in?
Well, it's in many ways it is never about the past or these projects. It's really about the present tense. And even this last project that I shot this material in 2001. And some of the footage that you saw, that you see already the destruction. And of course, you know, I'm watching and I'm wondering what happened to all these people, and something that is quite touching. It was quite touching for me when I was watching that the people in general, they were often worried about this that I'm filming. You know, they were asking, what are you doing with this? The children, they were asking me to take pictures of them. And it's really, you know, it shows the naivety of a child that, you know, doesn't know what is the meaning behind making an image. They just wanted to be photographed. And it's really repeating itself so many times during the filming. But it is a film about today. I don't think that I would use the images of the destruction of Gaza and what happened today. I think this is something that we already, all of us, carry it with us, and it's something that whenever we watch these, like this film, we will wonder all the time what happened to the people. So I'm more interested in really, creating in a way a sense of poetry and also a sense of hope. Even if this place today is destroyed, somehow it still exists, even just in the memory of the people.
Hello, thank you so much for your generosity with everything you've presented to us. My question is, so I think we all noticed that all the instances of everything you've presented, it was by chance that they found you or you found them the footage. And you found meaning in that. So will you in the future go looking for footages or other videos, or will you let this happen by chance the same way it happened to you in the past?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, from my own experience, I mean, I end up making these films. But no, actually, I have a project that I will be shooting next winter. We already got the financing for it, so I will make this film, unless a World War III will happen. But you know, this kind of, I think there's something, I was saying that before, and I always try to explain that whenever I give workshops or teach, that it's not about us searching for subjects. I think the subjects and the things that we want to talk about, they are so close to us sometimes that we cannot see them. And we should be led more than you know, run after subjects. Led by the found, you know, by what we find, by paying attention to things. And this was really the biggest lesson I had while working on the found footage of my father, which carries the title Unusual Summer, because that summer it rained. And everybody in the town would say this was an unusual summer. And the lesson was really that everything is there and you have really to look. I mean, even the life of these two sisters that always are together is interesting. And it's a story in itself. So the daily life is full of poetry and full of stories.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kamal. I think that was really fascinating, and again, I would have really a lot to talk about, so I keep it for the private discussion, because as someone who's really into psychoanalysis, I think like your work is really super intriguing, theoretically. Something we can discuss maybe later, but right now I just like want to ask a more simple question. So how important is like a narrative and storytelling for you in your work? Because you kind of became to say your talk by precisely deconstructing the kind of a traditional notion of the kitschy, you know, Chuck Norris, whatever narrative. So are you trying to kind of, you know, create fragments of narrative from those, let's say, like objet trouvé or found object images? Or how does it like work in the movies themselves?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because something that I always struggle with, especially when you make films, you need to finance them, you know, because you know, unlike writing a book, you know, when you write a proposal for a film, it has no value if you don't make a film, if you don't make the project a film. And it's a process that I never liked, because it makes you really, it can help in a way that it makes things clear for you. What is it that you want to tell? But sometimes it takes away really the mystery of the practice itself. And I'm someone that like to work with images. I like to find the narrative within the images, within what I found. And they are much really stronger than my imagination. For example, while working on the last film, I discovered in one of the archives a song, which is actually the title of this talk is in the Museum of Days. And this is a song that I discovered in one of the archives. And it became really such an important element in making the film. It opened the film and it closed the film. And so I'm trying really to, I'm not someone that is lineal in his way of thinking and telling stories, but I think one can really connect with people by sharing experiences and emotions. I don't know if I'm clear. It's not about really telling one story, because, for example, in Unusual Summer, there was something quite interesting there that I learned myself. You need like, I think in the past, Godard used to say, to make a film, you need a gun and a woman. And at some point, I mean, it's a cliche, I'm sorry for this. I mean, nobody can say this kind of stuff today, but this is like in the 70s. It's not my quote. So I would say, to make a film, you need a man throwing a stone. Because in a way, this person who threw the stone and broke the car window, without him, there was no film. So really, you need a crazy person in society. You know, you need someone to. And this is one of the conclusions that I did in the film. That life must be disrupted in order to be revealed. And which is so true, you know. I mean, it works in so many situations. Sometimes you just need one event, like this man throwing the stone, that brings all these people together that were recorded by my father. And in this case, there were so many narratives, you know. I mean, alone the story of the sisters is a film. So I am someone that really works in fragments rather than in one linear kind of one story, because one story actually does not exist. What commercial cinema and Hollywood does is really fake. I hope no one is from Hollywood here.
Yeah, I think there's something in what you just shown that really makes me think of Chris Marker. Aesthetics of Chris Marker's movies, and also just like looking at this image of photos, it kind of like with this question of the narrative, you know, it makes me think of like Proust writing his novels where basically nothing happens or almost nothing, looking at the photos and just trying to work through the real somehow into the imaginary, you know, and that's what's the greatest novel for me, because almost nothing happens in a way in terms of narrative.
Yeah, I read something like that. The film was on the movie page, and someone wrote there, "You wasted 80 minutes of my life. Nothing happens in this film." But he didn't get the point, you know. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, 8 hours of sleep. 12.
12 hours of the Empire State Building.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, George, please.
Kamal, that was extraordinary, and I feel especially privileged as I went to yesterday's conversation also.
I hope I didn't repeat myself.
Much. Well, in very productive ways you did so.
Okay.
But one of the things that was very interesting to me was that after about an hour and a half of very wonderful conversation about the image, someone said, et le son aussi, il faut discuter le son. And so you said something about the sound, which was you create the sounds. And you said something that you can contrast them with the image, and that the image was, the sound was somehow, I don't know if you used the term universal, but something like that. Does that make sense?
I kind of feel that the image itself, when you look at images, you see the faces, you see the colors, you see the background of where they come from. And we are, as human beings, unfortunately, we're full of prejudice, and we know too much. And it's really difficult to somehow disattach ourselves from what we know and what we see. This is completely different with sound. Sound has no identity, has no nationality.
Accents?
Sorry?
An accent.
Yeah, language. This is something else. I'm talking about sound. Like if you hear sound of someone walking, can be any person walking.
I'm wondering about that.
Maybe it's a woman, maybe it's a man, but okay.
Let
you
me
could
ask,
guess. And
let me.
So
can I push back on that just a little bit? And we're talking about. I think what happened in yesterday's conversation, also, but in this one was, at a certain point, there were these constructed, amazing soundscapes that you produce, and it occurs to me that these soundscapes, you're quite familiar with them, in a way that I'm not, which I think in a way undercuts the universality of it. It's not just people walking, it's people walking in a particular sound, a particular environment. There's a lot more to that, and you know all this, so I mean, you're saying it. So, and then there was the music, which I wanted to ask you who was playing in that last part.
I mean, sound is like this, for example, I go back again to the example of The Unusual Summer, the film, because it had no sound at all, so I had to create the sound. So I went there and I recorded sound. I basically did in sound what my father did with the camera, and recorded non-stop, and then I had to listen to all of that, which was a lot of work. But once you work with sound, things become emotional. And this is really quite fascinating with sound, because you kind of put emotions into the image. A little voice of, for example, a child, like in this case of my niece, reading from her book, from an English book, it has something emotional, for me at least.
But that emotion is connected with the history of the sound, and sounds bring histories with them. They bring all kinds of things. And what I found in your films is that the history of the sound comports with the history of the image to produce this much larger emotional.
Yeah, it's
narrative.
never actually like expressing exactly what you see in the images. There are other things happening in parallel to what you see in the image. So it's really I enjoy this work so much, and I'm lucky that I work with great sound artists, like in the case of the last film, with two really masters of sound. One from Italy, Attila Faravelli, that did the recordings of the original recordings, and the other one is Simon Fisher Turner, who is a musician. Probably you know about him. He did the music of most of the films of Derek Jarman. So I worked with him on this film, and we are working together again on the new film. And these collaborations are always really so amazing. And this is something that I really love about filmmaking, that it's a collective effort. I mean, people come together, and there is an interaction, and they bring in ideas, and
I was interested in the first films that you showed, the Chuck Norris and what was before that, because it seems, I mean, for colonized peoples, we have to move inside the space that the colonizer gives us, and it's not only physical constraints, but it's also mental constraints. The newspapers that the colonizer produces, the TV channels, and so on. So it's like it puts a lot of limits on you, and you work with that. So I was wondering if by getting into that movie theater and filming these things, you were intentionally recreating these constraints of a colonized as a form of like, everything that can bring for creativity.
I mean, it's always a question of point of view, meaning that I have a completely different point of view when I look at these images. I have different memories of these images. And when people would watch this scene with Chuck Norris, if they don't come from this specific place and they haven't seen the scene, of course, they don't have this perspective. But it is true that it has been always a danger to be imprisoned in these narratives that already exist. And my whole work is actually about deconstructing these narratives and creating something new out of it. But, of course, it's part of my history. We cannot somehow disattach ourselves at all from this history of colonialism, which has so many different forms. In literature, in what we read, in films, in almost everything, in what we eat, everything. It's so present. For me, the question is always how we deal with it, and I'm just trying to express myself and to find a way to narrate my own story, and to look at things differently. And most of the times, I really intervene in the image. I change things, and I deconstruct the image. I reframe. I remove the actors from the foreground because they were standing in my way. Because these films were shot very American. You know how they shoot American style? Like you never leave the frame empty. So I would waiting for the frame to be empty, never empty. I had to remove them. And so these are really gestures, if you want, of resistance, right? I mean, there are so many ways to do things in order to somehow narrate our stories. The stories of the people in the margins, the stories of the people in the background, that we are not able to pay attention to because on the foreground there is something more present. And since I worked on recollection, I cannot focus on films. I keep looking at the edges of the frame because this is where you find interesting things happening. Thank you. Oh, sorry.